Oh, we're live.
Great.
Half the day it's freezing and half the day it's quite
A
hot.
few things. Tonight we've got on the agenda, and I emailed it out beforehand. We're going to start with just a couple. I did a full cover-to-cover review of the budget one last time to make sure that we've kind of talked about all the manager's recommendations. I did uncover two small sections that missed our discussion. You've discussed them before. We haven't discussed the manager's recommendation relative to the ARPA request and the historic commission request. That I just want to kind of get out of the way. It's the last two pieces of the budget. Then we'll go into a bit of the log changes review. I won't take you through every single one, but just kind of go over that. And then the general top-line budget view, sort of where we're at with the mill rate. When I bring it up at first, don't get too excited because it could go really only up now. Potentially up substantially, depending on how you approve of our accounting and strategies for some roads and personnel and kind of what we're thinking. So, but I do want to start with kind of the general overview of the budget. And then we'll go to debt with Nate to kind of give you an overview of where we're at, which I think will help inform some of these larger strategic decisions throughout the rest of the meeting. And then ARPA, which that's one of the ones we're hoping is a quick one. We talked about that a bunch. This is just, here's the final on ARPA. Then we'll go to capital piece with Mike, which is related to ARPA, but I think we've done the final accounting on it in the budget, and we'll talk about that, which will bleed us into roads, kind of what we're currently asking for in the budget that really kind of finishes out this year, but then also sort of previews a bond as we look to kind of this fall, because we have a lot of deferred maintenance in that category, and that's kind of, I think, the next big adventure for this team and the Public Works team is what I'm calling an infrastructure plan, the 1-year capital plan, 5-year capital plan, but I think it's more inclusive of that. And then we'll do the personnel to kind of finish it up, as well as the COLA, which is kind of the last really kind of big ticket item on where we're going with the mill rate. So with that, if you could go to 413. Actually, sorry, let's do 4. Just tap this. 403 actually. Really 406. Sorry. And it's the Arbor Commission request for 11,000. So I was originally thinking of doing a standard 20% reduction on this to kind of pull down just like other departments. I know we're getting to the very end of the line there. It seems like, but that's that was kind of what I was going into this, and but at the same time, it also got me thinking this is a new budget request at 11,000. I was thinking go down, it was going down to 9,000. But the other piece was, do we keep this in the Arbor Commission, or do we kind of put this in trees, beautification, in Public Works as like, this is what we're going to spend on these activities, which is kind of what the Arbor Commission is stating that these will be spent on. So the Historic Commission kind of has their own budget. Are we funding the budget within Arbor Commission and they kind of align with us spending it throughout the year? We could do it that way. Or we could create a little just better connectivity through Public Works, and like this is Arbor Commission's sort of budget to spend on trees within the kind of Public Works or highway budget. We could go either way. I just didn't know if on the accounting on this side of things, A, are we okay going to 9,000, and then B, do we keep it kind of in the Arbor Commission where it's at, or it's kind of tagged as trees, beautification within Public Works? Because the point has definitely been heard, and Jana and Matt and myself and Adam have really been working on, regardless of the way this budget season goes, like a much better accounting of beautification, trees, flowers, landscaping, park maintenance, all of that sort of thing. Yep.
My only 2 cents on it, and I'm on the Arbor Commission, is it's a brand new commission,
Mm-hmm.
and it's filled with people who are so knowledgeable. And I worry, after all the effort that they put in, and they put in a lot of effort, you know, making this, whatever, all the stuff that they do, they put in a lot of effort, and I think it would be demoralizing if, you know, all these other commissions do get some kind of budget, and the Arbor Commission just gets told, like, you don't get a budget, we'll just
Yeah.
call that beautification. And I think it's important, I think it's just starting, and so I'd be in favor of at least, I'd be in favor of keeping it as it is, but at least keeping it at 9,000.
So then I think you can create like a new department if you want, like, there's historic preservation, there, you know, you could even make its own little
Yep.
department and break these up if you need to.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think I agree with you that going forward, figuring out like who exactly does what makes a lot of sense, but I wouldn't want all of these people who are in there doing that work to be like, oh,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they're doing amazing stuff, love their team. I think we'll keep it as kind of their funding, and maybe they say, hey, we want to spend this on this within trees, and we'll categorize it. And we'll keep close alignment spending, but we'll keep it there.
yeah, and most of the work they're doing, like, for example,
Right of way.
yeah, or like they're using GIS software from people, from their own jobs, and they're doing all that work, like, they're not asking for any compensation for it, so
Okay.
it probably benefits the city.
Great. So we'll keep that, the 9,000 level, and we're bringing to the 9,000 level, we'll keep with the Arbor Commission. And we have a lot of beautification, we've already increased it, pulling it over from the other budget. So I also think in terms of capital planning, infrastructure planning, I consider the trees and as sort of living infrastructure for the city too, so that, and I know they have the 200,000 planting grant and other things, so we'll definitely keep lockstep with them on how to spend with that money, but also other beautification money that we have in the budget.
Yeah,
So-
and in the future, you may be able to take it out of there, and I think what you're saying makes sense.
Matt, are they working closely with you, like when they're looking at right-of-ways and things?
When I have time, but they want to, so yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like, once I'm back at full staff, they'll probably work with the assistant more on the right-of-way
Oh, that
project.
type of thing.
But yeah, I mean, like, they're in pretty regular communication with me in my
Okay.
department, yeah.
Perfect.
If that decrease from 11 to 9 doesn't allow them to do that, I think $5,000 right of way GIS project, and that needs to be done, is there money in the planning, or?
No, so I never put that back into my budget, just because there's a grant out there I can probably find to fund the full thing likely. But even if you take the 2,000 out, bring it down to 9,000, that would, I forget what the request fully detailed, but again, if that's just the tree planting portion of it, they should have money to do the rest of the projects that weren't specifically like tree planting.
Cool.
And I think also, and I'm happy to talk to Tabitha too, it's like, if anybody's that short from a matching grant or something like that, yeah, it's kind of just like, I feel like the rest of our departments. We'll get some couch cushions, and we'll catalog it appropriately, and we'll budget for it appropriately, so we have kind of what these contingency expenses that come up all the time. But we'll make sure that, yeah, we don't miss out on that just because it's not in that piece, but.
Yeah, no, and like Matt said, I mean, his life has been a little crazy, and then Elizabeth was there, not there, but they definitely want to work
Yeah.
and are eager to
Mhm.
be in coordination, yeah.
Because they would be so great for the beautification and
Yeah.
how we take care of a lot of this stuff that
Yeah,
I'm just kind of sitting there with no one knowing what to do with that.
yeah, and they're eager to let their knowledge
Yeah,
help us, yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, I think beautification side of things, we're doing a follow-up meeting soon. We'll probably have some pretty big updates on that. The team's got some great ideas, and I think we're really gelling together. On the subject of, we'll go to 415, historic preservation. This is also one where I brought them down 20%. Similar, just across the board, folks are being asked to do some of their non-discretionary spending down to 20%. Maybe make some tough choices and some smaller things, but as I applied to the others, wanted to make sure I was consistent. But I noticed that I had a note that I'd talked to. What was that? Again, their requests had signage and Riverwalk,
Recreation.
training books,
Recreation.
memberships, those types of things. And, if there's something there that they're not gonna, happy to discuss with them directly and, figure it out. But it's, looking towards next year too, on how we, maybe do a little bit more of that coordination with our commissions and how the budget, in the same way that we've done so much with other departments. I kind of realized at this stage in the game, like, I probably should have done that bring in of those folks in the same, like, really intense way we've done with our department heads 3 or 4 times. And next year to do the same, just to make sure it's like not coming out of left field for them, so. That's it, thankfully, on all of these sections. Now we're gonna switch to the log changes piece. And this is in the, if you go up to the top here, this is kind of what we call the Charlie's budget meeting. We're not, like, this is basically where we started. So 3 weeks ago, when we reconsolidated the budget stuff and redid this formats, we, if you go maybe down to the mill rate. No, go down. Oh, yeah.
Is your prescription sunglasses?
Yeah, keep going down.
You like that?
There we go.
Good
So,
luck.
we're at a 27 million commit at the 18.2 mill rate. Which actually, now that I look at the comparative mill rates and, yep.
You told us why you had to wear your sunglasses. Could you say it for the record? So we all don't get emails tomorrow about the new city
All I
manager
can
with.
think of is Joe Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It looks great, but I
It
think
looks
we
really
need to
good.
just throw it out there.
I left my prescription glasses. When I got into my car, I put my prescription glasses into my sunglasses case, and then left them with my coffee and zipped out. So I've had a lot of nights here until about 10:30 at night. So I think,
I just wanted the record
We've,
to.
yeah. Some of those is, I think that was part of it.
Dude,
But put them on and hopefully make the numbers lower, okay?
Yeah,
Just-
sure. Janice, when I went into our pre-meeting to this, where we did this review, she started playing I Wear My Sunglasses at Night. On the way in, so, we kind of kept this on the side just so we kind of knew where we were before we started making changes into where we log change. So we're at 18.2 in the mill rate, which I didn't really like even compared to last year. But to be honest, looking back to 2022 at the 1803, and then as we've talked in this process of going back even a long time, I've realized kind of that huge drop. Really we spent, there's a lot of deferred maintenance because of that drop, and there was a lot of spending that actually occurred that even looking at the previous budget that really was being paid for, and then was being budgeted for but wasn't paid for. So there was a lot of that in there. And so it's been a learning process through this cycle. You can go to the log changes. I won't bore you with this. I can bring you every single one of them, from the pulling out the COLA increases, the new employee requests, the police cruiser, the snowmobile club, the tannage, the county tax. Like, we've been logging each piece of it, making sure that we don't solve it before it's there. And the last 2 pieces, Mike, at the very bottom, I think we can put X's on historic preservation budget, and the Arbor Commission. Some of the A's and T's are, for my own reference, just things to keep track of on, getting more quotes for things, other things that weren't relative to this budget. So if we go now to the where we're at now,
What do you want?
this general budget overview.
Go back
the
to
lot-
out of your budget into the other one?
Yeah, into the live one. And again, this is kind of pre-COLA increases, pre a lot of the other stuff we'll talk about, but before we get into the big ones, I just kind of wanted to let you know where we're at. Okay, actually, no, go to the.
Back here.
Little up.
Sorry,
No worries.
right here.
So we're at 17.39. Again, this is without COLAs, without any staff increases, with a pretty substantially lowered roads, at least from a this year taxpayer commitment level. There's still some bonding flexibility there. From that $27 million down to about 26. We also noticed that in previous years, the amount to be raised by taxes, like the commitments that were budgeted, were all about $1 million under. So meaning like what was presented in the budget cycle and what was on paper and what Larry actually sent out was about $1 million less. So the jumps seem bigger to what the actuals that went out were.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, so if you see like the 24 million,
Yep.
so that's an actual, so that's from Larry's, remember that sheet that I said, these are the actual commitments that went out.
Yeah,
One of
that's
the
like the
thing
tax bills that he sent out totaled that.
totaled,
much.
I noticed in FY '24 in the budgeted, because again, the software implementations, the upgrades, it had only budgeted 23 million. So they came out with a budget that said we're gonna spend 23 million something, the tax commit was actually 24 million. And then there's even larger ones for FY '23, which only said 19,900,000.
But you know why?
Again, it's the discrepancies between what they put in the budgets, which were, their Excel sheets, and they could have been missing big things that actually went through, and that they didn't get accounted for until the commitment. So that's a big kind of question mark of why what they put in the budget sheets in the programs didn't match what Larry and the assessing team actually put out. Which was, so that it seemed like it was one of my other things, like, wow, this is a really big jump this year. Okay, one reason for that is like they under budgeted in previous years, even though they overspent a variety of areas. Or there's things like last year where they didn't spend $1.4 million on roads, even though the council passed, and hypothetically, you tax for those roads, but those didn't happen. So there's a fair amount of that happening in previous practices where the budgeting and the actuals weren't matching up. And, we're still in the accounting and the auditing process, and I think I'll have probably more to report on that as we go forward. But in addition to just the numbers changing, that's why the percent differences have changed a little bit too, as opposed to what came in the Charlie's budget at the beginning. And happy to talk a little more offline to take you through that.
Is $1 million more? Because that's a heck of a capital outlay. They should have reduced the mill rate if that happened.
Right.
Well, the mills were true. So the mill rates were
Wanna add something?
I don't know if Larry.
Well,
I feel like it must have something to do with the way
Hey,
those.
perfect timing, Larry.
Did you know we were talking about you?
I think it was the budgeting, like just the Excel sheets that they were bringing into you were built in one area.
Just wasn't
Yeah,
accurate.
but the budget is the budget, and so then
Right.
when you have your commitment, right, you're budgeting for 23 million. If Larry comes in with 24 point something, you adjust the mill rate, or you have a heck of a capital outlay, which you can only have a certain percentage of it. So how do we have $1 million extra in taxation without adjusting the mill rate?
When I do the tax rate, I just take the finance figures from finance. I don't calculate what those are. And I get those from the finance director. And last year, that big increase, I was presented that number, and I questioned it. It was such a big number. So I had Ann come up, and to verify, I compared it and I showed it to her, compared to the previous years. I go, this is a big jump. Are we sure this is the number to use? And she was pretty sure, but I asked that Glenn come up and sit with us and verify if he agrees with Ann that that was the number to use. And they both, they went through it, not line by line, but they did a lot of review right there in front of me at my desk and found that that was the number.
I think that number was correct. I think the prior year was the one that was
Yeah.
incorrect. That's why.
Oh,
and I
that's why
remember
it looks
I
like
do
it's
me-
so much?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I agree. I actually think Larry, and I talked to Sue about this too, our tax collector, and she was really suspicious the year we went down to 15.7.
Yeah.
And that was a suspicion. Now, you also have, like, I think the 18 point, like, or the 17.3 mill rate, or that commitment was closer. I actually still think that was probably under budgeted for what was actually going out.
Absolutely.
As evidenced by the fact that $1.5 million in roads which was, approved during this budget process last time, have not been done, and, and where we're at are not there, which is, in some ways, is also the historical analysis of this, is still being done with the auditing and the accounting. But it also explains, as Steve and I know we talked about last time, of like these increases and actually, if you look back, there was way under budgeting to what was actually being spent. And, whether it was, the funding, the general balance, and especially with an account that's not reconciled, and you're just saying, well, we have surplus funds, there's really no such thing as surplus funds in a non-reconciled account. So, a variety of expenses, I don't need it, a lot of them. Steve, you were here for some of them. They basically got overspent but not accounted for. So, and now we're accounting for them, truly. And the benefits was another side of that, right? We talked about that, and we'll see that in a second. We weren't accounting for FICA on the overtime. So there was a big piece of even we've spent a lot of time on making the payroll actuals match the budgeted, through the paycheck system, so that it's, these are the hard numbers that actually went out, not what's based on the systems anymore, so.
I also do remember, I don't know if it was Ann or it might have been Josh, who thought we were double dipping with TIF money, having it both ways, or it should have been, but it wasn't, or something like that. And TIF gets up there, the TIF money, it's like $1 million this year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The TIF on how you account for it is super complicated. Debt is also super complicated. I had a previous number here for you on that they accounted for debt. I think this is 2 months ago, when we got the first sheet that had 1.9 million in debt on the general side of things. So I was like, wow, why did debt go up $1 million? Well, actually, no, there's enterprise accounts. So it's not, we don't have to increase debt on our general fund, it's the enterprise accounts. It's much more like predictable rate now. But if you were to make that kind of mistake in any previous budget, you could under budget or over, a fairly significant amount, which is why having a lot of heads and a lot of people and having it built in the software programs are so important.
So one thing I want to note, with like our first round that came up in the draft, which of course Charlie was saying actuals versus budgeted. Now, again, the amounts that were brought in here were actually the numbers from the Munis software that were coming into here. So if they had entered the amounts into Munis, so they wouldn't match what the council actually approved, that would show our variance as well. So I'm wondering myself whether or not it's just the fact that not everything was entered correctly for all the expenses and revenues, and that's why we have the difference in the net total between what was actually done for math and what was done on manual Excel spreadsheet versus what's actually here. So like you say, when the TIF stuff and different things, if it's not accounted for properly, it'll throw these numbers off in the software to bring it out differently than what was actually put on paper, so.
Just for kind of in a good year, when you know your numbers and everything, we pass our budget, right? And we're not really passing the mill rate, we're passing how much money we're gonna spend for the year. And then when Larry gets his work all done, he says, this is the amount of assessment you have, and then the mill rate is set by that. So, and then there's a little bit of overlay that you're allowed for a surplus, like a just in case surplus. But that's a maximum of, like, well, do you know, Larry? It's like, it's just a 5%?
It can be pretty high, but,
Yeah, there's a maximum, and so
Larry, let's come back.
if you have, so if it comes back and Larry's assessment is different,
Yeah.
and he says, oh my God, we have another, $1 million in taxation,
Yeah.
then usually the finance person would come back to the council and say, hey, or God forbid if you have to raise it, then they'd go back to the council and say, hey, I know you passed this, but we gotta figure out what the overlay is, and do we not want overlay, do we not need surplus to cover ourselves, or
Right.
how do you wanna do that?
So overlay typically will cover your abatements throughout the year as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of why you build a little bit in there, but.
Interestingly, I listened to went through the Biddeford Town Manager's municipal budgeting class, and he was saying that the original reason for the overlay was they used to do this by hand. So if you went out there, you wouldn't want to say you owe me, $195.35. You just want to say $96. So that was like, it wasn't, he was saying most people think of it as like giving yourself some flexibility, but really it was like when people were doing this with slide rules, just to make it like,
make the math
easier
cleaner.
for the actual tax collector
Yeah,
to go.
do that, yeah.
Collect, which I think it was
But
interesting.
if we happen to have a big abatement or something like that happens, it's covered by your overlay.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes that overlay is really small, too.
all depends on how close you come.
Yeah.
It's all on you, Larry.
He came within $100,000 one year from what he estimated. I was like,
Yeah.
that's pretty good
That's
over
pretty
what,
impressive.
$1.6 billion or something?
That's when nobody was selling or buying.
And Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but just to kind of, double stamp that, if you all were to pass this budget next week and it said 26,079,254, like that's the number for this amount of things that we need to go. And then, we have an estimated mill rate on a 5% general, 17.9, but then we're going to Larry's side of the house, and he's gonna do the final evaluations, and that's the amount of money we're bringing in, and he's gonna try and, dial that mill rate to match that based on the actual
Well,
valuation.
your tax collector, finance person does. Larry comes back and says, this is how much money, this is the amount of assessment.
Right.
And he's got everything assessed, this is what we are, everything's in the books, and he gives us the assessment, and then you're back to your treasurer and tax collector and city manager that says, okay, this is what we have, this is what the mill rate is.
And it could be 17.42 or 17.36, depending on that final valuation. But the number, 26 blah, 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 is still what we're trying to get towards could be a little overlay
Right.
at the end of the day. We're not going to come back and say, actually, we taxed for $1 million more, which is the really confusing part when you look back and you say, wow, why did the budget say this, but the actual tax commitment says this? 'Cause
Right.
Larry's is
Yeah.
solid gold. That was,
It's not that we want a big overlay.
No.
But yes, usually what I do is I get the numbers from the finance director and I do the calculation. And then whatever that turns out to be, we can then adjust based on the overlay to round that figure off if we want to. And then, once the finance director and I think we have what we agree on, we go to the city manager to inform the city managers, this is what the tax rate will be. And if the city manager wants to make an adjustment, we do that.
It's a god-awful formula too, that page that you have to fill out. for committee. I don't know, I don't think I could do it anymore. I'm sure Tammy could, but I know I couldn't, it's horrible.
Good with me.
good with you.
I just want to mention the software
Thank
piece.
you.
Because
Yeah.
the software wasn't entered right.
Yeah, thank you, that makes
Yep.
sense.
So now that we know where we're kind of starting from with, again, some potentials for increases, we're gonna have Nate, Nate take you.
Date night, date night.
Nate's gonna take you through debt.
Sorry, Mike, print some stuff out.
Thank you.
So, pass this to you guys.
Here, just, I can
Oh,
pass them down.
take 'em out.
Need one?
One more.
Well,
Someone-
One more.
Well, we can
We're-
put
I think
a
we're
couple
good.
of
We're good?
mailboxes.
Yeah, we gotta put them in
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
mailboxes.
I can make some more packets.
Okay.
Do you need more copies?
No, I have some more stuff here. So. So if you look at pages 1, 2, and 3, I believe, the first page just gives you an overview of our current debt.
And I should just, at the beginning here, just say, we're gonna finalize these books, and then, this will be included in the budget book that we print out, we're gonna do that. It takes a long time, so we really need everything dialed in to polish it up, get the digital budget book, put it together, but we're gonna start that process tomorrow, hopefully by Monday, have the final books online and with you, or I should say draft final, so that on Wednesday of next week, if you need to look up more things, you'll have all of this in there as well, so.
I figured you already had 600 pages. Might as well give you 15 more. So this should, like I said, and it's up on the screen if it's easier to see. I tried to make it as big as possible, but just showing the next 6 years. This first page that you're looking at shows all the obligation bonds, general obligation bonds, and then obviously you see the CWSRF, the Clean Water state revolving fund, and then the drinking water. So all the enterprise and non-enterprise funds are included in that. So you can just see kind of where the debt sits and where we're forecasted for the next 6 years. On page 2, if you like, I kind of split it up so you can see the breakdown between the enterprise accounts and just the general government account. So you can see the breakdown of what's actually being taxed on, and obviously the enterprise accounts fund for themselves. So that's the same dollar amount, but like I said, just kind of gives you a breakdown of the two. And if you have questions, you can.
And so that blue is gonna be what's on your
Yeah.
taxpayer, and then the orange is on your ratepayers.
And just so you know, we have the debt broken up in the budget books kind of by department. So, for instance, if you go to the police account, police budget, you'll see their portion of the GOB. If you go to the fire, et cetera, et cetera. So if you were to look at just the debt section, it's not gonna give you the total amount, water, wastewater, everyone's gonna have their own portion, which will add up to this total. Page 3, Charlie was asking me, just to kind of look at similar cities in the area, just to see where we sit as far as our debt compared to our total appropriations. I've been in Maine for 3.5 months, so I thought I knew the similar cities. So I picked Brewer, Orono, and Skowhegan. I hope I did good.
Very good.
Yeah, try to find population similarities, just to see. So if you look at Ellsworth, with the non-enterprise debt at 1.1 million, we're at 5.49% of total appropriations. If you include the enterprise accounts, we're about 10%. It's about 9.99. And then I did a breakdown, obviously, of Brewer, Orono, and Skowhegan, just to see the percentages. So obviously 13.65, and you can obviously go down the list and see that. But I just kind of want to see where we sit currently, where our debt sits compared to other cities in the area.
Just one more note on that. So Brewer's the only one of these comp cities that has a water department and wastewater department. Orono and Skowhegan are part of districts. And so if you add the enterprise debt to Brewer, it's an additional 1.8 million in enterprise debt. So that percentage doesn't include that total either.
So in 2026, the government debt goes up instead of down? Do we have something new going in?
Well, you're talking about in 2026 or 2025?
2025 says 1.143, and 2026 says 1.161.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. I should have been prepared to see the
I'm
breakdown,
sorry.
but it's okay.
The next page,
Yeah, it was split between enterprise and non.
yeah, there.
Yeah. You hit that little magnifying glass plus
Me.
at the bottom.
I just didn't know if we have a, do we have a band that's turning into a bond?
The 2023 GOB, like the payment schedule's increasing this
Yeah,
year?
it's probably the 2023 GOB. I was trying to look really quick at the notes.
detail pages on this.
Because we typically do level principal, not level payment, so usually it should start dropping down a little bit.
Actually, it's a 2016 GOB payment.
It's bumping up a little bit.
Yeah, the last payment of the 2016 GOB.
Goes from 158,000 this year to 317,000 next year as the last payment on that bond.
Like a balloon payment? The last-
There's
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
with
the
that.
2016
Something.
GOB.
We
I
can
can
pick
look
Zap
into
in and
that.
get some detail on it.
Yeah, I can look into it
2016.
because, yeah, that doesn't make sense,
We
but.
don't normally do balloon payments.
No.
You're right, I'll look into that. It's definitely the 2016 GOB.
Yeah.
Just not sure why that payment is so large.
Before we get to the other ones, unfortunately, we can't argue as much about debt. Hopefully, that can go down a little more. But just want to kind of get, and I think this really more informs local roads, where we're at now, when we go into a potential fall bonding cycle for some infrastructure stuff. And we'll get much, much deeper on where we're at financially and other cities and towns as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty pleased with the level of debt. It's really good. I mean, as far as the general, not the enterprise, but
I thought the
it
same thing.
does leave us
Yeah.
room.
Yeah, and this is something that it's kind of like, we're gonna get the infrastructure plan in order. What are all the things that are deferred maintenance that haven't happened, road projects, and what, well, yep.
Can I just ask a quick question to Michelle's point? Is there some generally accepted such and such percent of debt is good or appropriate or?
I honestly, actually, Charlie and I were talking about that. I was trying to find a good, and maybe Tammy or Michelle knows, I couldn't find,
Some like.
yeah, like, this is where you should sit at.
number, yeah.
I looked and I looked and I couldn't find, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, there is, the state says you can only have so much.
There's a statute about it.
Yeah, and I couldn't find that statute.
Um,
I'm trying Googling it now.
Go for it.
And, you know, I was starting to Google things and realized I would
I
just
was
say
just
something
curious if
bad.
there was like, that was like,
Is it a
oh, we
percentage
all
of
know.
appropriations, Tammy, or a percentage of assessment is the statute?
Oh, interesting.
I
And
can't
you,
remember, I'm sorry, but I
It's
can
okay.
find, I can find it. It's,
Matt's trying to Google quick.
Is in there.
I was just curious if it was something you knew that I
I
didn't
think
know.
ours is, can be up to 150 million, is remember, that we
our
could
charter
borrow.
has a certain amount that we have to go to.
But statute also has it somewhere.
I don't think we're gonna be up at 150
No,
million.
no, I'm always like.
I don't think we'll hit
oh,
that
even with
threshold.
the school, like you have to
Well,
include all of
school and
your-
everything.
Yeah.
You have to include water, wastewater.
Yeah, everything,
it's
all the-
everything. Yep.
Yeah, total debt, you know, if you look at everything across the municipality of schools, water, wastewater, all of that, you can't exceed 15% of your
That's
last
it.
state valuation.
That's it,
Yeah.
There you
yes.
go.
State valuation.
Is that the charter or the state?
That's a state.
State.
of your state valuation.
So the state valuation,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Oh, that's
it was.
an
So
enormous-
$1 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
That's where you said that, yeah, that's why.
Oh, that's gonna be fun
150
here.
million makes sense.
Yeah, I broke it down and like 7.5% was for like general operating, 10% was for school, and then it was another 7.5% for.
I should ask you to help me
water,
Google that.
wastewater.
Let's get a baseball team
Yeah,
here.
well, you
Let's
just-
get like an MLB team. See what.
So the state valuation is like how much the state says
Yeah.
this town is
Yeah.
worth.
So Tammy, you're probably right then, it's probably closer to that
Which is more
160,
than what we say it's
170
worth.
then.
Yeah, it was up there before. It
Yeah.
was crazy. It was like $150 million,
Yeah.
so.
Well, having these.
Well, let's not go that
comps
far.
is helpful
No.
as well. If What you're saying about Brewers, 1.8 million in water, wastewater, they'd be up like past 20%.
Yes.
20%
Mhm.
total.
And as part of an infrastructure plan like this one will have those questions on, sure, what's the maximum, but like, you know, a lot of financial, talking to some people around the state on really where you want to be at, where you're looking over the long term, how you want to kind of layer this in, what you want to, you know, keep funding in for reserves and a non-bond cycle, because, you know, there's, and what we want to do for infrastructure, and, you know, we'll have a lot more answers to that. I think the debt section, as we go into a bonding cycle, will be a lot more robust, so.
Because you don't want to hold yourself hostage so you can't do anything later on, if something
Yeah.
comes up that you really want to work
Yeah.
on, so.
You are leveraging your future a bit, but I kind of feel like that's also been happening the past 3 or 4 years. I mean, or under. So unless there's more questions on debt, we're going to go to ARPA next, which is, you know, the third kind of part of your handout here. And Matt?
Upper activity, that one?
ARPA activity, probably, it's really the second page, fiscal year 2025. You know, you've seen the first page, just the accounting of previous years.
Yeah, so there's not too many changes to ARPA, but we did make a couple, so, don't remember if the last workshop or not, we talked about firepower being 30,000, so that's an increase to, upgrade the power capacities of the fire department, especially with the new, ventilation system. Right now, they trip, or they would trip, sorry Scott, you're here, so you can maybe answer, you would trip some breakers if we got the ventilation system and we didn't do this upgrade.
You're referring to facilities looking for the electrical upgrades?
Yes.
Yes, so we're currently tripping the system anyways, but with the addition of the exhaust system, it would also further tax the electrical system downstairs.
And so,
Come to the podium, please.
But But Jim did explain that to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim did talk to us.
So the current the exhaust system that was approved back in May, given the state of the current electrical system where we're already having breaker trips due to the new fire trucks, well, the newer fire trucks that are downstairs that tax the system, the addition of the exhaust system is going to further tax that electrical system, which is why facilities requested the upgrades to the electrical for each bay of the fire station and with the sub panel to allow for the exhaust system to be powered without taxing the system any further.
So that's,
What is firepower?
That's
what
the firepower.
electrical upgrade.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. I'm sorry. I was up here in facilities. I'm sorry. God, that's firepower.
Oh, firepower.
It just has a, it has a
Wow.
cool name.
I
called
never thought
Firepower.
the fire department had firepower.
I know.
I got water power.
And so with that change for emergency services, still we made some changes to the police requests that were under ARPA. So for the cameras, for the cruisers and body cams, we took that out of ARPA. Well, first, police negotiated with Motorola that the first year payment would be brought down to $25,000. We moved that out of ARPA to their capital expenses because the county is going after a grant that would cover that cost for the cost of the whole 5 years of the body cams and cruiser cams. So there's a risk though if we had paid for it with ARPA to start and they did get the grant, we would then owe the federal government $25,000. So we just took it out of ARPA just so we wouldn't have that happen, which then freed up a couple of extra bucks to go into local roads, which is what we've added at the bottom there, Christian Ridge Road engineering to finish. We'll start finishing Christian Ridge Road. The first half was completed earlier this year, but then we could do the engineering to complete improvements to that road, and we put that in at the remaining amount, which was $45,879, which is close to what we think the total engineering would cost, probably around $50,000. So
And the tasers are back in, it looks like?
the tasers were never taken out, yeah.
Okay.
Just about.
Looks good.
Just the body
Okay.
cameras, yeah.
And I'm sorry, the IT facilities North Tower repairs.
Yeah, that's from, I think Jim talked about this a little bit too, but there was a study done a couple of years ago on repairs and maintenance that need to be done to the Ellsworth North Tower, which is used for communications with emergency services.
Oh, okay.
And Jason and Jim estimated about 10 grand worth of repairs needs to be done to them. Yeah.
And we might not be able to do this one this year, even if we get it out, but as we talked before, ARPA is, as long as it's obligated and we're going forward with it, and Jason was pretty insistent that we need to get this one done, so.
It'll be spent by the ARPA deadline of December 31st, 2026.
Yeah.
Looks good.
Great.
Excellent. We don't have to bring Nate in to, we thought we'd finish this one quick. So we're going to go to capital improvements, which next, which Mike is going to lead.
You got the mic?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So really, if you look at what we've listed out here, the biggest thing that you're gonna see is the reduction in road improvement, which is local roads, to 320,000. And so the thought process behind that is that we have, where did you guys put that breakdown sheet?
The local roads?
Yeah,
It's under budget overview.
and I'll talk about that next.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, you know, the current plan we're looking at is a combination of general fund money, bond money, and structuring everything so that we're prepared for the projects that we're gonna do next spring. The facilities, the fire capital projects, highway capital projects, all those things are brought back in here out of ARPA, because ARPA's been listed as a revenue in the budget. So if we're gonna list ARPA as a revenue in the budget, we had to have the expense accounts against it. And so, under highway capital projects, that's not all ARPA, there's $14,500 of that. That was for Adams' air compressor project that we had left in originally. But for everything else, police, radio tower, all of that stuff is stuff that we brought back in from ARPA and added it into this capital budget, because we listed ARPA as a revenue in the budget, so you have to have the expense coming out of the budget for it.
Is that in the general fund revenue?
Yep. So,
What's the grant revenue at the top?
I'm sorry, say that again?
What's the grant revenue if you go up on that screen?
Is it the match from?
No, that's not the match.
Oh, that's the stream crossing.
Oh, right, for
The,
Redbridge
so
Road.
the Redbridge Road Culvert Project received a stream crossing grant, and I think the total's 250 and our match is 125. Is that correct?
Well, no, our match is, in the application, we put 600,000 as the match.
But anyway, that was the
Just a
amount that
little
was allocated.
Yeah.
That was the amount that was allocated.
What?
That was the amount that was allocated for the stream crossing grant.
Yeah.
Have we already received those funds?
Yeah, I believe so.
Mhm. Yes.
If we've already received those funds, then
that
it wouldn't
just,
be considered a revenue.
Or I think it's reimbursement style, actually. So we will receive them in FY '25 when the project starts. So we have to spend the money and then we get the money back.
And I'm happy to double.
We've been awarded
add
the
a couple
funds, sorry.
more
We
lines.
have not
That's
received the
fine.
funds,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and you're gonna talk about the Redbridge Road Culvert, right?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about Redbridge Road Culvert and the kind of local roads. And again, why the 700,000 to 320? That doesn't mean we're not doing more than that this year. It doesn't mean we're not doing that for the next year. I think we're trying to pull some of this off on a lot of the deferred maintenance onto some bond options that, so we're not trying to catch up in 1 year on the taxpayer. But we have some details on that to go over next. Any other questions on that before we go to local roads and what that 320 is for and kind of what the initial stages of bond, getting caught up on roads is going to be is the next conversation.
So did you say that DOT is going to be doing High Street and Oak Street next year?
They're not doing Oak Street next
Not Oak
year.
Street?
The High Street bid is opening June 26th.
Okay.
So
So
could,
this fall, maybe?
Maybe, I don't know, it depends on what the bids come back.
people's gut reaction is it's going to be in spring, but until the bids get opened, we won't, it could be this fall, so.
I'm just thinking because if High Street's being done, we've got drainage program going on, and if we do, a couple in town where we just did all these others in town, it might be okay to only do this amount around here because that High Street project's gonna be so huge.
Yeah.
Surrey roads.
Well,
Yeah, and
so,
we're not
so
gonna-
not only
People
that,
are gonna
Michelle,
have a fit.
not only that, High Street's gonna be done, but also there's a paving project that's gonna happen this year as well. That's gonna go from the bridge all the way to Orland, and they're gonna pave the whole Bucksport Road. So that's gonna happen as well.
Didn't they just do that? Didn't they just do a grind and pave?
I don't know, but that's what they,
They're still
That's,
working.
not that I'm complaining.
Yeah,
but,
but that's on their
But
list
if
of
they're doing
stuff.
the Surrey Road, so then if we chime in with a bunch of things,
yeah.
It just-
Surrey Road got pushed out,
oh, it did?
so Surrey Road has been pushed out till next year, but Reggie's Water project is going out to bid
July 11th.
July 11th, and that's gonna
Yeah.
include paving as well. So there'll be paving on the Surrey Road, be paving on the Bucksport Road, paving on High Street if it comes in this fall. And then, the couple of roads that we're looking at, I think, which is Foster.
Yeah, so if
Yeah,
you look at,
it needs
when we
to
go
be-
to the local roads breakdown, there's like 2 roads that are high priority that we have to do like right away. And then the rest is included in like the bond ban strategy, so that way it's like we can wait for that and get that money, but.
Yeah,
So
I
here's
just
the
think that
breakdown.
That might give us a little break on the bonding too, until we figure out how much money we actually have.
I think it's going to be, and if you want to go to city budget FY '25 local roads budget page, yeah, I think that's kind of the infrastructure plan that we're going to put together. Is going to here's what's happening. We'll kind of live updated. Here's what's happening from the DOT. We'll probably have maps of things. Here's what we're doing at this year. Here's what's in the works for next year. I think a lot of this year is going to be engineering. That could be a lot of the bond funding is going to be for getting, I'm kind of like shovels down and pencils up. And having this all Gantt charted out.
Yes.
So at any time of day, you can go and really see what's the full big picture of DOT and Ellsworth and what we're thinking, and we're live updating it. It's also why I think some staff capabilities to handle this and what's kind of left in the past, which we'll talk about at the end, is, why we don't have that piece yet. The team is really, I think, a good bulk is gonna switch to that, to get that infrastructure plan together, so.
I think with any luck, if we wait until 2025, we may see lower interest rates too.
Yeah.
Well,
If
the
we wait to
thought
do the
process,
borrowing then.
I'm sorry.
Huh?
The thought process too is really, it's tough to try and do road projects in the middle of summer. And if we start, if we get, typically a budget starts July 1st, and then after July 1st is when you would look at, trying to put out paving projects, and that's not conducive for us. So, the thought process is, for this year, is any roads that, we have our list of roads, if they need engineering, whatever needs to happen, get all our ducks in a row, and be ready to put these things out to bid in December. And then get the bids back, know what the number is, and then when bond season happens in March, or ban, we're ready, and we have the number, and we can ban or bond, whatever the decision is. And by spring, we're doing roads. And so we're not wasting half of the building season.
And just,
after the
You're not
paving
paying
season.
more.
And like with these budget freezes and lack of predictability in finance, it may be a mix of, here's what the yearly taxpayer commit is gonna be on roads and the bond band, both for spring and fall, and we kind of keep layering this in, matching the plan and our financial analysis and cash flow and whatnot, so, yep.
This is great.
The drainage thing that Brent Bridges told us about, where does that fit into this?
So that's already money that's been, through borrowing, so like we don't have to budget necessarily for that because it's already,
It's DEP,
We
we got
have
8.6
DEP money,
million from
right.
DEP.
Yeah, I know he explained all of it, and I
Yeah,
should remember
and
where all this money
they are
came from.
actually in the process of doing some design work for us to be able to get those projects up and moving. And so we've been communicating with Jim Saffner, the bond bank, back and forth. We
Yeah, that
will
was
be
that whole
giving
thing that
him-
he explained to us
Yeah,
about.
so we will be giving him the information, but we're gonna need to start drawing down that money soon. And so we have that whole thing in motion to be able to start doing that and get those projects moving forward. Because Oak Street is being done the year after next. The High Street is gonna be done first. And then a small section of State Street is also gonna be done. And then the following year, the major project for us, unless it gets pushed off, is complete rebuild of Oak Street, including drainage, water, and possibly sewer, but drainage and water for sure. That's part of the DOT project.
Thank you, I just needed to remember that.
Yep.
So the 320 is sort of for those items as sort of the local, or essentially the taxpayer commit for this year. There's some ARPA on the Christian Ridge Road engineering. The next piece, the 2.28 million, is sort of the initial, ban bond potential. Now, with reconciliation, for the Red Bridge Road, the, previous councils have already allocated pretty substantial funds for that project, but without the reconciliation and seeing, kind of where we're at with our general fund, like, this band number could be less based on what the reconciliation, how much cash on hand we have, where we're at. I think it's, in large measure, it's going to be part of, by that period of time, we have the reconciliation is kind of what our cash position is. We need to have pretty adequate reserves. I think we have that that's going to also trigger, we had that reserve fund conversation, the 1.3 million and the other accounts. I think that'll kind of, that's going to be the time when we can say, what can we allocate to stay in reserves? What could be potentially for previous projects? What did get done? What didn't get done? But this 2.28 million, really, talking with Adam, is sort of the what didn't get done in FY '24, what should be done in FY '25. That's beyond even the 320,000 for this year's commit, but that we're going to be working on either surplus funds from post reconciliation if that's there, or banning, bonding, and this number may change up or down, based on the next 3 or 4 weeks as we look to the infrastructure plan, and I shouldn't promise 4 weeks of an infrastructure plan, but when we come back to present to you all, really dialing in on that, so.
Is the Bayside Road Engineering where that thing washed out last year?
No, it's from the wastewater plant down to right before the culvert. The culvert is a separate project that we are looking at grant funding to address.
What about the end of Foster Street? I know that always like ices over in the winter time.
That's included in the Foster Street paving, though,
Okay.
so it's a T of Foster and water.
Yeah, because that's been on the books for a
Yeah.
long time. and-
Yeah, no, they're looking at doing, 2 drainage crossings down there to eliminate that problem.
Okay, good.
The multi-use trail project,
So that's part of the whole reconciliation piece where previous councils had already approved about $60,000 between local roads and TIF funding to address the multi-use trail, but again, we don't know what of that is technically still there, so we're putting in just the full 60,000 again, to cover it.
And was that the one that was gonna attach it to this?
The Sunrise Trail, yeah.
Great. If we're, no more questions on that piece, we'll go to the payroll change summary. Maybe if you can go back to the city budget overview, we'll talk about the COLAs. So, and this is, as per previous requests, to kind of pull out any COLAs from the current budget, that's where that current commit is at, is if, there's 0% COLA. But we wanted to show you where kind of 0% COLA, what it does to the budget. And 2%, 3%, 4%. To me, this is really interesting. In some ways, you can kind of tell where, what are the big cost drivers? We're looking at 45% of the budget to cut from because the school's already passed. But then we're actually, where we're really looking to kind of cut from, we're going to is even within the City Hall government side, it's interesting the cost drivers. So for your total general government payroll, and benefits, about 2 million. And that's for all those departments. For public safety, you're looking at close to 5 million. For the police and fire and dispatch. Public works, about 1.2 million. The facility maintenance, it's interesting, I think I might include the facilities maintenance in general government. I don't know why that's the curveball there, and then the library and TIF. I think library goes down there was like some reason that it wasn't like we're cutting somebody from library, I think there was.
That's because they changed the full-time employee to part-time.
That's what it was, right. And then TIF, economic development, that's Jana's. Talking to Jana though, so it was just saying, hey, I don't make 113,000, because again, this is fringe. We're doing the true accounting of fringe. So when you see that 0% COLA, that's accounting for just the increase of the benefits that economic development and the person in there would have. If you see the 2% in COLA, that's gonna be, both what the salary increase would be, but also you're gonna have to account for taxes and everything else, so doing kind of true accounting on these things, so you can see the full financial impact. And then at the end here, we have the kind of grand totals of what the account percent, and again, to me, this was like the piece, is, okay, if we wanna do 0% COLAs for non-union employees, we're still, just because of collective bargaining agreements and benefit increases, and things like actually accounting for the federal taxes on FICA or on overtime, we're increasing the budget by $616,000, and that's no new hires, 0% COLAs, just to meet our collective bargaining agreements and benefit increases this year. Which is why when you look at a previous year with only a $100,000 increase on total size of city government, you realize like how, these are, if you want to do a 2% COLA for the non-union increase, you're at 55,000. The 3% is at 82,000. And the 4% is the 109,000. And I guess what that means is, depending on what you all want to do here, if we want to do a 3% COLA increase for the non-union employees, which is pretty, I think in line with inflation, it's 82,000, and we're going to do an adjustment on that. That's the first kind of up adjustment on that, the commitment that will be a change. Let you all sit with that and.
So the 82 is just on non-union employees.
Correct.
That's
Currently
benefits and
filled,
everything.
like current, just.
No new employee, like
No
no
new employees,
adding
so-
anybody. This is, all that's out of the budget. That's actually why Scott's here, because we even took his 1.5 firefighter. It's in my request that we do that. But I think he saw his budget go down online because he's always in the system. It's interesting. We did this for a lot of departments. We took all the new requests out, but Scott was the only one who was like, "Why'd you take that?" I mean, it's not happening. I said, we took them all out.
Is the standard to give an increase every year, or to skip years, or is there a standard?
I don't know what's standard here. In my government experience, yeah, we get a COLA increase in non-union positions. And sometimes it comes alongside a collective bargaining agreement and it can create some collision. And then you have, managers overseeing people that are making, significantly more, and that could create a bigger adjustment. And sometimes it's just a high inflationary year or whatnot. So I don't know, Tammy, Michelle, if you all, it was typical for a COLA or not.
It is, and it's really only fair because the union automatically get COLA adjustments every single year. And
Because they've negotiated for
Because
it,
they
and then the
negotiated for
non-union
it.
employees don't have that opportunity to come here and speak to the council,
So these numbers, making a choice, 2%, 3%, 4%, only refers to the non-union employees of the city.
Correct, and it includes their, and it's just on really the payroll increase, but then also taxes and whatnot, so.
And it says insurances too, so that's their benefits that have to do with payroll
see.
matches for.
Yeah, I have a whole collage of pictures of
I see that.
various people in front of giant Excel screens. Great one of Carrie and Nate. The payroll one was a lot. That was a lot
I
of.
bet it was.
I think Nate's got some ideas for next year of how to automate a lot of this stuff, so. And there's also, it's not in the printouts, but in the final budgets, we have, details each department by position, benefit increases, year to years. We actually had it with COLAs too, so that was a little too detailed. But, so that'll live in the budget as well. I know we talked about that previously, Tammy, so it's been very helpful to kind of back in the actuals into the rest of the budget too.
Do we know what and I can't remember because we saw so many of them, but do you know what the percentages are on the new union negotiations or the collective bargaining agreements that we just did?
No, I don't have those.
It's around 3, okay.
And the only one I remember is highway gets $3 per hour increase, which is probably more than 3%.
Police is higher.
I think it was 27% over like 3 years for police is what I heard. I
Yeah,
don't-
like 9% a
They're
year.
on the end of
I'm
their.
talking about just
Yeah,
the
just the
ones
ones
this
we just
year.
did, yep.
Yeah, I can talk to.
27% COLA increase?
Over 3 years, I think.
Fire was 3% this year.
Fire was 3 this year.
I think wastewater was 3.
There was some step increases before the
And I think
percentages
It
too.
was 10% over 3 years 10.5% over 3 years for us, but 3% is what FY '24 is, FY '25.
it's difficult for me, I know, and some of this, I think one of the big drivers in that increase too is the benefit changes too, so some of it's the salary piece, some of it was like the previously negotiated union increases, I think on the police side as well, that are kind of staggered in and already negotiated. I think next year's, but then there was a pretty substantial benefits change, I think, for police and fire based on the police negotiation, and then it also triggered a fire increase on the benefit side, was that it?
Yeah, that happened
Retirement.
in FY '24, where they changed their HRA benefits.
And then there's,
That's the only thing that changed.
I thought it was the retirement.
The retirement did also, correct, because they went to the 3C.
And then there's the other piece, which was just the unbudgeted for overtime, and this doesn't even capture the previous years. So there was years where they just weren't doing the test. So again, I was kind of talking to Carrie, like, can we just not do it again, and but that money's going to be paid out, and this is what the actual is, and this is what the increase is going to be. So don't like that big number, but it is what it is. So and that's with no COLAs. So. Does council want to go with 2, 3, 4%? I don't know if, my recommendation is 3%. I feel like it seemed like in line with the other unions that went this year and inflation, and it's at the 82,123 level, which we would bring into the adjustment.
Feel good about it?
Okay.
And
So
then you
that's-
have in your budget, like stipends, you said too, right, still?
Yeah, so-
For people, like, for all the ones that are doing this stuff, they can get stipends and.
Yeah, and this is something I'd like to get away from, but then that's a good segue. Let's go to the new position. It's the tiny print. We can go on this too.
I see that.
I'm comfortable with 3% as well.
Sorry,
I'm fine
just,
with
can I just, I'm sorry, I didn't, not quite understand, but 616,000, the 0%, that captures the union COLA increases.
Union COLA, Union COLA benefits increases across all forms of government. So it's not
Yeah,
just union
Whether
benefit.
union or not union. It's
Non-union-
Union COLA plus also
Plus
non-union.
benefits, just pay your.
Like what health insurance costs and all that kind of stuff.
And then previously, the reason it's kind of a big spike too is the previously unbudgeted for overtime for federal taxes and whatnot.
Okay.
So,
Based on my quick math, looking up there, Casey, if you look at the benefits and the union negotiated raises for the unions, it was about 550,000. So there was like an extra 110,000
Of
that
the
was.
other stuff.
yeah, and you can kind of, if you took like public safety and then pulled their 0% COLA, you could see what drives that increase this year. So, public safety is increasing, 435,000 of that increases in there.
So, but the
Six-
budget's only gonna go up, if we choose the 3%, it's only gonna be the
Correct.
82,000.
82,120.
We're locked
So
with-
not 616.
Yeah.
Because that's like regardless.
No,
Yeah, it's already
This is
locked
just-
in.
Regardless,
Yeah.
with 616 is out unless we make some really big changes. And changes to these areas. Yeah, and you can see the majority of that 616,000 is in public safety and public works. And it's really interesting, right? It's, this whole side of government costs you that much, and these two cost you that much, which kind of gets me to my next point.
We're a great deal.
Sorry, not to let you not go on to your next point.
No, no.
But do you think 3%, that's your recommendation? We have good people working for our city now, and you feel like people are gonna be comfortable with that? It feels fair and stuff.
It feels fair, it feels like aligned with inflation, it feels into the other, in line with the other increases. I feel where it feels unfair is gonna be when we get to the new position requests and kind of the, this side of government, which is, $2 million in total in the general government versus the 5 million in public safety and the 1.2 in public works, I think. This is where the staffing and I think the pressure I think we need some staffing upgrades in this category. And, it's, again, not even nearly the most expensive part of government, but is kind of feeling the pressure and needs. So more than a COLA,
This is the more important.
yeah, the new positions, dealing with the turnover, dealing with the vacancies, dealing with the increase in just all kinds of, government requests. I really feel it coming from the outside coming in, like I heard this during my interview process of just how stressed and overwhelmed, and I have too much on my plate. And it's not just the people in this building. I was speaking to the head of a nonprofit recently at their office and talked about my requests for staffing, and this turnover and focus on culture and our great, I think just is such an amazing job, and we have great benefits and we have mission driven. Like, we need to kind of stop that turnover and create, and he said, thank you. He's like, it's been really tough dealing with the turnover in City Hall. And so it's not even just the people that are here. I'm sure there's organizations everywhere that it's just, I've had to deal with 4 planners in the last 5 years. And so, being able to kind of right-size some of the general government side of things so that we can really kind of level up and take all these increases in demands, I think is going to be really important to kind of increase capacity. And I feel myself, I've got 2 books full of checklist items, 2/3 of which are not being addressed because I'm still dealing with turnover and trying to right-size the organization. And yeah, but at the same time, I try to be very budget conscious, but I'm trying to produce value, especially considering the budget as a whole and seeing those other parts of government which are driving a lot of cost. I think this piece and the roads and infrastructure has probably been let go the last 4 or 5 years. That these were the pieces that weren't invested in, and that in some ways, and this was something we can't bond for in the fall, for additional staff, to kind of handle a lot of these pressures. At the same time, I'm also in sort of it's a difficult position for me too, and saying, hey, here's the number I need for X, which would usually be after a 3 or 4 month kind of business process redesign and analysis. But we'll talk about the top here. I put in, and again, we pulled everything out of the budget. The new position requests for an HR general assistant, like sharing an admin assistant, finance for an assistant deputy treasurer, code enforcement for an admin assistant, city manager for a communications director. We budgeted fully on this, but again, this is this is really the intent of the current city manager's administrative assistant, who's on leave, would come back as the comms director. And I don't want to, I would love to, but I may not backfill the admin assistant. So really, that's just a $20,000 increase. It really isn't a, $60,000 request. The firefighter for 1.5, the Parks and Rec tree warden, the Parks and Rec director, and the public works shared administrative assistant. And then I kind of broke down on the right side here, just fiscal year, just 24 turnover, which was 21 people. So there's this other kind of budget process where these are like the numbers you might go with, but there's going to be a bunch, hopefully not a bunch, but there was a bunch of people last year that, that turned over in the department. Many of them were filled, some of them weren't. And so budgeting for that, how do we kind of do the analysis of that? I'd like to cut that number down, but I wanted to include it here so we at least memorialize this piece. And I think that'll be one of my success metrics as a city manager for this council at my year review, is to see that piece is stopped, because I think the additional staff requests are also relative to the loss of institutional knowledge, and that stipends. So what's happened is all these turnover happens, stipends, people start wearing 3 or 4 hats and stop doing their, sole job really well. And now they're doing 3 jobs for a period of time. And then the vacant positions, and this is a mix of things that are, definitely going to be filled, hopefully soon, like the finance director, the police chief, city clerk. In some ways, we already have interims in these categories, but we don't have clarity there. That could be an upgrade internally, which would create backfill like below those individuals in any of these areas. Same thing with the vacancy in the public works director last year. They replaced that with the city engineer as a vacancy. I don't think we're going to go with the city engineer as that piece, but it could be a potential public works director or an infrastructure director. Could be an external hire, could be an internal hire. And then that creates backfills depending on where we're at. So it's really difficult to kind of figure out exactly the number that I'm going to need to kind of create the bandwidth in this sort of underinvested inside of government. So I'm sort of looking to you all for direction, because this is like the final piece of what we add to the budget. And if you look at the new position manager adjustment request, this is like the pieces that I believe from all of the requests that I do believe need to be added in. One is that a human resources specialist dedicated to human resources. I think you can just look at this and think of our HR director, who's not just trying to post and refill jobs, but try to do training, handles all of the payroll every single week. Any issue that comes up week to week with any of our 100+ employees, shouldn't be a shared person. That needs to be dedicated HR specialists. People are policy, and this is going to be so I really feel like that one needs to be in there. Finance and additional assistant deputy treasurer. Again, really this is a critical element, the kind of beating heart of a lot of pieces of the organization that have dependencies on it to run well, and I really want to make sure that piece is there. Code enforcement as well. Again, they were at kind of 3 staff capacity due to succession planning. I should say separately for Larry on that note, we do have another planned retirement, so we have built into this budget a little more into assessing to plan for a 2-3 month turnover period where we hire somebody new in assessing to kind of get trained. So we added $12,000 to the budget.
Has he said he's retiring?
No, it's
Marcia.
Oh.
Larry's not allowed to.
Sorry, I didn't want to.
Yeah, I was like,
What would we do?
That's why we had
I like
the
how you
police.
tried to say that nice.
the communications director too, upgrading Maura to that piece. She was incredible for the 2 months that I was fortunate enough to be working with her. I'm really excited to have her back, but she's got so much potential to help the city in communications and internal, external strategy that I really feel like, I'm willing to live without an admin assistant for a while. For
I'll
that.
just say, for more, even though she's not working right now, I still get texts and calls of like, Matt, did you remember to do this? Matt, this is changed. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting on it.
She was honest about some of the FEMA reimbursements, and we got to, the kid is so cute. I don't know how, mine
Her
looked
kid,
like
not
aliens when we were doing
She's also cute, but that would be inappropriate.
Oh, she agrees. We both agree that they were not, they're very attractive now, but they were not. So yeah, I really feel like that's one I would like to move forward with. And the firefighter is 1.5. I just talked about how expensive, but they're expensive because they're really needed for public safety. This is not, it's really just to kind of show that, and the increased EMS demands, the kind of changing nature of ambulance in the city for health and safety, really feel like that 1.5 should stay despite how expensive it is, and we need it. The people need it. Now, beyond that, a chief of staff, or a deputy city manager that's been a position in the city before. I kind of feel like there's a lot of other areas that need help first before I could, and if there was budget left over towards the end of next year and we're kind of tracking where we go. My kind of recommendation, as limited as it can be, is, we're at 422 with the manager request. On the sort of staffing above that level. And again, I wouldn't call that a new staffing. A lot of it's kind of backfilling. Could be promotions, new hires, cross-training, sidebar negotiations with the unions. I think there's a lot of kind of change management and how do we release that pressure in the most effective way. And even the parks director, recreation, these pieces, I think they're valuable where that comes into like first, second, third, fourth, and kind of the hiring category. I'm almost of the opinion that I'd like to go with just sort of the original staff recommendation at the $599, $735 for the requests, which is a little over my sort of definitely have to do or should like to do at 422. And again, we're talking with the fringe and everything this time around.
The next page is his
So is that,
Charlie recommendations.
is that already built into the budget, the 422?
No, this is what we'd have to add back. So this is all pulled out now. So this is the last piece that gets. to
Even the
add back.
vacant positions?
Yeah, none of that's in there.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, it's sort
So
of.
the vacant positions aren't in the budget?
Well, there's some that are, I'm sorry, some are. Finance director, police chief, clerk.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, most of these are in
The
there.
assistant planner.
The assistant planner. But again, this is like and this is where it's, we're not gonna, we haven't hired that person. It could be, they're actually planned as a full. So there is some flex.
I just would like to, are we, so, so are we could possibly have 1.7 more million?
No. It's basically a choice between, well, you could say 0, and we'll,
Choice between 422 and
422 and 600, yeah. Or even cutting less of the 422.
So the only thing that I worry about is, your adjustments, I completely, the 422,000, because, you can just sit here and you can see the need in those areas. It's like but the ones, and I hate to say this, but the ones that are, like the rec director and the tree warden and things like that, before we do those extra ones, I just would just like to know where the city is in its spending and its money-wise and surpluses or anything like that. If we could just, like, get into the end of the fall or even the end of the year and then know where we are, then we can look at surplus, we can look at these things and say, you know what, we now have the money to do these extra things that we didn't put into the budget. And it's like, it might be a half a year. We don't really need hopefully wouldn't need
The
the
problem is, like, we can't bond for that stuff.
No, I'm not talking about, no, not bonding, we don't bond for operational. But, no, but like, if surplus, not bonding, but surplus. So if we get everything done, because we have not encumbered anything yet either. So we don't even know, there might be projects that we could go and back encumber some of the things from our surplus if we have any. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
So-
we might have no dollars.
Exactly,
It
and
could
if
be-
we have
could be
no dollars,
s-
then we don't need to have these extracurricular,
Tree warden, Parks and Rec director.
right.
Right, well,
You see where I'm getting at?
We
Your recommendations, I absolutely see. I
Well,
mean,
because they're necessary.
they're necessary, but these other ones, I just, before we go and spend more money on things like that, we really, this city needs to know where we are financially.
I'd put Parks and Rec and the tree warden and the rec director in that category, and if we know, and, you know, as we're going throughout the year, if more stipends have turned to kind of full salaries, but a public works director, you know, having the city manager also act as public works director, like, you know, this will affect us before then. Like, in my opinion, we need to be going out, and the clerks, which we're already having turnover and transition to create additional capacity there, is not necessarily on this, which is why I'm saying, like, there's pressure now that, so I wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward without a little more, you know, there's additional needs beyond what are here. And then I don't know exactly what they are, because it could be upgrades, you know, there could be backfills, it's not necessarily that person's title, that are real. As I saw before, it could be an additional person in IT over the next year, so that Nate, who's over there, can help organize, structure a lot of these departments that have, you know, spent years now kind of underwater with tasks and administrative burdens that we need to dig out of. This one, I feel like the new manager's adjustment for those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, is kind of the stabilization. If not, I can't hire beyond that on, you know, starting July 1, and some of these other pieces, like, I'm gonna have to kind of reshuffle the deck on, you know, what we're gonna, you know, that capital plan, and because people have to kind of go back to focus on their jobs. We can't keep pulling 6 different people to work on this at one time, which
I
is.
guess I'm not clear on what you're asking for then.
That's why an additional, which, 200, or the 180, to accommodate a potential public works director, you know, additional clerks.
You're talking out of the city manager's budget.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're talking about two different things,
I-
Charlie. So he
Yeah, I'm-
So there's the line
requested in the
item.
city manager budget to have the extra money put in for stipends and upgrades and things like that.
Isn't that already in
And
there?
that's already in the city manager's budget.
Well, no, that's out. The stipends is, you asked originally to take out stipends, and my request for $250,000 for additional
took it out.
staffing, based on a business process redesign and what we may need.
Yeah, so you're sort of asking to put that back in.
Yeah,
And
that's-
basically, it's like, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positions that you're pretty clear on,
Plus the city
yes,
manager's budget.
plus extra 250,000 for you to like
Yeah, let me pull it up.
figure out what you actually need.
Yeah.
To me, that seems,
I
comfortable.
thought we had said that not to take that out. because
Yeah, we
It
did.
went from
I-
250
Can you look,
to
can you look at
200.
your
I'm
active
doing
budget?
it. I'm on it.
And then also, I'm looking at the new position request, so you're thinking we need another $422,000 added? Because that's not, because I went back and looked at the numbers from here,
Yeah, that's
and
those.
and like the assistant, the administrative assistant for the code enforcement is in the department budget, code enforcement budget already.
Yeah, if it's the hard copies of things, that was over the last.
Yeah, you took it out
10, we
since
took
then.
everything out. So, and anything that was a new
Oh.
request is now,
So we
you
can
know.
look at it.
So this is accurate, what you're looking at is
Yeah.
not updated.
Oh,
So what's on, I can't read that with my,
Let me
And
see.
same thing, when the original manager's request had 250,000 for additional, actually say it was 150,000 for additional, and then just, we're already paying 101,000 in stipends. I kept the stipends where it was at, but you asked for it to be split. I'm kind of struggling just saying I need 150,000 for something. These are the position requests that we need. And it's kind of the difficulty of budgeting, on July 1st in a short pay cycle
I'm sorry, my.
for an entire year's worth of staffing needs that are really unpredictable.
I feel comfortable
Is
with
this
this.
the active one now?
Yeah, so,
there's
so
101.
originally, that first line was 250 is what was discussed, 101 that we're already paying. And then Charlie had requested an extra 150,000 to be able to do the process redesign and things like that. And then, after we had the last budget meeting, we talked about pulling out all the extra COLAs and all the extra positions and all that, so you guys could see what just the budget would look like with the current staffing, where it's at, and break out the 0%, 2%, 3%, 4%. Everything got pulled out. So all the new positions got pulled out, the 150,000 got pulled out, all that stuff got pulled out.
Yeah.
At this point, now, Charlie still wants to have the 150,000, which actually, I remember the guidance was, don't take that out, but we took it out. And then he's also asking for those 4 or 5 new positions as well.
So what's the 101,000?
That
Currently
was all the
paid.
stipends that we're already paying.
We're already paying $101,000 in stipends. And it's,
So this weren't budgeted for before.
Right.
this is the everybody wearing hats. There's gonna be, and this is the other piece that's gonna be tricky to budget for. It's like, I'd like to get that number down substantially, like almost to nothing for future years, but it's gonna have to be through full-time roles, backfilling, upgrades, potential sidebar negotiations, really right-sizing this so that we don't have, in some ways, like that stipend amount, which is never budgeted before in the past, by the way, that's
Yeah,
something
you guys
that
never saw it.
every
No,
year
it's just
there's
like,
stipends.
Oh, yeah, oh,
We've just heard people
yeah.
were taking on additional duties.
I like.
Well,
Yeah.
stipends
Matt needs
typically are
money. Money, let's give it to
temporary,
him,
right?
that kind of stuff.
That's the thing, that's the disconnect, is stipends typically are temporary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And we've kind of
right,
gotten
and you're trying to make real.
into a situation where some of them became not temporary. And so that's Charlie's burden, is gonna be how he deals with
And I see it.
that 101,000, but on top of that, his 150 is not necessarily for stipends as much as it is for him to be able to redesign the organization and do what he thinks he needs to do to make everything in the city hall be more efficient and put people in the places where they need to be, that their talents are most useful. And if that requires him to upgrade them a little bit, then he needs the flexibility to upgrade them.
So can you show us, so if we add the 83,000 for 3% COLA,
Yep, somebody add this up because I'm gonna put it in the adjustment.
just do 82 would be 5, and then 675, just say 675. How much, what does that put the mill rate at?
That's what I'm going to.
83,000.
675.
That would be,
675.
Be another, like-
that would be the
plus
422
stipends.
plus the
It's gonna be another
150 plus the
6/10 of a
82.
mil.
Plus the
I guess.
82.
That's 6/10 of a mil.
I might, or
675,000?
It's gonna put us up.
So I can put it right here. How much you want me to put in there?
675.
695?
75.
675?
And I would also put this in the category of, like,
No, it's only
17.84.
17.8. Totally fine. Go for it.
What was the final verdict?
It was yes.
Just
The verdict
remember,
was yes.
and this is also something I'm happy to, I'm not there yet on, to be, with this turnover of staff, we have 3 or 4 in the fire on vacancies now. Like, we're getting, like, succession planning, where we need to hire at, it's like a beautiful mind on the flow chart, to try and figure out the backfilling and where it has to go.
Was it in the budget or?
If we want to just kind of placeholder the 422 for now, we have one more final budget meeting, and maybe I can talk to you, Michelle, and Tammy, and give you a little bit more of like this flow chart difficulty and the capacities and really drill
I think
into
they
where
just
it's
said
at.
they're all good with it.
And I'm not,
That
I
was
mean,
that way.
I honestly am not trying to stagnate, but and I get, 17.8 or whatever it is up there, but we don't know what we're walking into with this budget when it's reconciled. And that scares me, and I just don't want to, if we have to do a surplus budget in the middle of the year because we find out stuff had happened a couple of years ago, the only way you can do that is by either cutting everything completely or just a second, Steve, I'm almost
Oh,
done.
no, that's fine.
Just cutting everything completely, freezing the budget so we don't do anything, and if you've hired people, you can't do that. Or,
Well, that's what you did last year, because everything's in such disarray.
right. And so you're gonna, if you're over planning, over budgeting for things that could possibly wait, or you might not even know, if you hire a new city clerk and you do the financial person, you do some of that stuff, things may even out without having to hire someone else. It's been kind of chaotic for staff for 5 years now. I mean, they're all doing everybody else's job, but I just don't want to get us in over our heads and put that mill rate up when it is a very good possibility that we're gonna have to do something drastic next year. We may not, but I just think that we ought to
What
be
do you
thinking
mean?
about that. Because if Charlie's right, and we've overspent, God forbid, because we don't know what our reconciliations are, and so,
But we're at the end of the FY year, so we do know our kind of cash position in terms of, but it's just, we didn't do $1.4 million in roads last year. We didn't do, I mean, in a lot of ways,
Right, but
it's
where is
because
it?
we didn't have a public works director. It's because we didn't have a lot of investment in staff that could do the paperwork on a lot of these things, that could have a
but
reconciling
you've been
account.
saying that we've overspent because there's no way with the way that our spending is only increased. We don't know where we are. We know what our cash position is, but we have no idea what our budget position is.
Yeah, in terms of where you want to be from a
Balance.
reserve fund and, yeah,
What's
and
encumbered
bonding.
of that fund balance, what's already encumbered that we can't spend on budget, what is, was set aside for reserves or whatever. We don't know what our unencumbered fund balance is. And that's our spending money.
Right, but wouldn't we want to, given that there are still some unknowns, keep a mill rate that is reasonable while allowing as much flexibility so that we don't punish ourselves? Like, here we are, a city with people who work for it, with stuff that has to be done, and then if we don't give Charlie a little bit of extra breathing room for staff, then we've gone yet another year not getting stuff done because we don't have the staff to get the stuff done that we know we need to get done.
But I get that, and that's why, like, the 422 and the COLA, I mean, absolutely, because that's gonna help us move forward. But I just worry that this is a mill rate of a little over $0.5 and a 5% assessment increase. That's gonna hit hard again.
Yeah, but
That's-
we're,
And I get it, I mean, like I said, I get it, we live in Ellsworth, but, what happens if we are way behind, and if we do all this and then we hire people right off, right? And then we find out we gotta have a budget freeze, you're gonna have a whole bunch of people that can't do anything because they can't spend any money.
no.
I just
no.
think there needs to be a balance there.
There's incredible amount of, I mean, the checklist I could hire a lot. I mean, you look at that full-time employee count from, 2019. And again, if we just wanted to just keep these ones which are necessary, I'm recommending, and bring back 2 positions, a public works director and a deputy city manager, which used to exist in this city, that's gonna be more than the 180,000 that I'm requesting above this. That's what I'm talking, I mean, I'm not talking about, I'm talking really what's the equivalent of 2 positions. That could be 1 position, additional position, and 3 additional upgrades for staff to handle the work.
And that amount of money, because, right, we're already saying, yes, 422,000, yes, 82,000, whatever that adds up to, already is gonna bring that number to, it's not like that last 150,000 is gonna be it's not gonna make a huge difference.
Yeah, I'm asking for the 180 delta, or we freeze that and we're gonna, we'll make it work. We're gonna make it work and it's gonna be great, but I do feel like 1.5 more for this year, is in some pretty critical positions, whether it's clerk, whether it's IT, whether it's public works, especially public works, to organize that unit is pretty key.
Poor Steve, you had
No,
hand up.
I'm
Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
fine. There's no secrets that I'm not in love with any budget I've ever seen so far. This is my 3rd one. But it would be a real shame to hire a new city manager and not give him tools in his toolbox. And, you know, I can go through and purge the back truck for 600,000. I could purge a lot of these giveaways that I don't agree with. I think Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth is quite capable of giving away their own money to their own causes. I don't think they need a tax bill to do it. That's not the right position, and I've tried to learn John's position, and I'm talking in broader scopes here. But there's a lot of things that could be done differently. And the one thing I don't want to frig up is hiring a new city manager that is digging in right to his elbows and not give him the tools in the toolbox. Therefore, I would think that we would, I missed a little bit of this, but we would fund the 600,000, unless I'm missing something here, the new position request for 150K staff when I was
Yep.
gone.
Yep.
So it's these, which is what?
675.
Yeah, 675, 700,000.
Correct. And 5 of those are allocated, or are sort of recommended at the 422,000 level. The rest of the previous request at the 600,000, which I think is the right level, it might not be those exact positions. A mix, and if we can get to the end of the line and kind of go towards the budget season and the reconciliation comes out better, I think that's what would trigger the Parks and Rec director and others, because we'll be tracking all this in real time. We'll know how this, we might have so much vacancy that it could fund additional positions, or we may not. We may get to a position where we're at, but yeah,
And
that,
to speak to that a little bit further, that, you know, just because we budget for it, doesn't mean we spend for it.
But
It
that doesn't
means-
help you when the people are paying the tax bill. They're paying the tax bill for what you budget,
Well, again.
not for what you spend.
Again, and I don't want to see any tax increase, and obviously there's tax increases here, but you can't, I hate to hire a new city manager and then not let him manage.
And I'd also say in terms of like the tax bill, what's driving the tax bill, like you can see where it's driving. This is not that piece.
No, I get it.
And this is what's been underinvested in, and there's 55% of the budget that we're not even talking about here.
I was just hoping, really and truly hoping, that we wouldn't go up half, 3/4 of a mil, and a 5% increase in assessment.
I wish they didn't do 15.7 for that 1 year.
I get it, but it was a big increase last year.
Yeah.
It was a huge increase for a lot of people.
Therefore, maybe we need to rethink. I'm all for keeping the bills the same as last year. I don't care if you call it valuation, if you call it mill rate, you call it anything you want. But I'm not for a bigger bill for Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth, but I'm not for hiring a new city manager and not giving you some flexibility either. So there's a balance.
So I do think that budget needs to be looked at again, though, because I just looked at the city manager budget. I know you said it's different in here than what's on there, but one line item in the city manager budget is $185,000 for payroll, and
Pull up a new one.
Let me go back to the city manager's budget, so we can all be
And-
looking at the same thing.
so if the communication director, it looks like you still have Moore's position in there, and it needs to just be adjusted. You
Exactly.
have the administrative assistant position.
Let's check that out.
Yeah, the 422 is kind of misleading, whereas like code is actually a decrease because we had a full-time code enforcement
Right,
officer.
so I mean, I think
swap into
those
an
numbers need to
admin
be,
assistant. Moore's
it's not just
positions-
adding 600, or 675,000, I think it's probably,
Yeah,
Closer to,
because,
like,
because
350.
Moore is already on the payroll, so you really only
right,
gonna
and you need to
increase
get
her
rid
salary.
of those.
I get what you're saying, so we drop this
Okay.
down.
Yeah.
So the number is gonna drop, because depending on what you do with hiring or upgrades, any upgrade that you do, part of the salary is already being captured. You're only gonna actually end up adding whatever the upgrade is.
That makes
So-
sense.
And I think,
So
well,
I think that number's actually gonna significantly.
and maybe I can
Decrease.
just talk, like, it seems like folks are in agreement with this piece on the sort of my request based on the initial request, the 422. But now I can, once we know that we're gonna go or the communications director is gonna afford it, I can rebuild that back into here. I'll rebuild these in there so you can see actuals, we'll see what the
Yeah.
additional would be for a few of the areas that I'm thinking. I can basically give you scenarios. I don't know 100% it's gonna be this person at this or backfill. I do have some general ideas of what that's gonna be to really get us right size, but I can make that sort of a final discussion and maybe a vote on at the next council meeting. We do have, I think that's allowable, right? We can talk about the budget during the budget vote. I'll take this back as like the really big question mark on how much we cut. I will, say, especially looking at the overall picture of the budget, it seems like it always kind of comes down to this, and I'm sure not the first city manager, where you get to the end of the line and you cut general government, or you disinvest in it, or roads. And that's, I feel like we live with that every year, and we get to the end of the line, and like, what we're talking about cutting, like, there probably are all kinds of areas we could go into if we want to find, but especially just being with the staff for 8 weeks, like, we're working, there is.
Well, no one's saying that you're not working, I just do worry about that mill rate. This is way better than it was last year but again, we're down at the end of the line, and we're gonna just approve the budget, you know what I mean?
And 16 meetings later.
Well, but I still think,
Right.
right, like part of the thing, right, there's the tax bill, there's the mill rate, and then there's part of this big picture thing, which is, I just feel boring for saying this over and over again, but all this stuff that has not been taken care of over years, that we have got to catch up on it. And there is no way that we catch up on it without spending taxpayer money. It just won't happen. So
I agree with you, but I just don't think we need to spend it all in 2 years, and especially if I was comfortable with the numbers, if I was comfortable with the financial position of this city, I would be much more comfortable in spending money. But we have no idea. We have no idea where we stand financially. And so that's what keeps worrying me, is that if we're behind, if we need to raise funds for any reason, we're gonna be in the same position next year.
Is there any sense in building in, I'm only thinking of things like the recreation department staffer that was recommended by the chair to be brought in halfway through the year, so a part-time salary. That also kind of builds in, we have to budget for the tax for it, but it's only half of a salary, and it's sort of a contingency for, we do the reconciliation, we find out, oh, actually, we don't have these funds. Well, maybe we can encumber that half a salary for next year when we do have the funds, but maybe there's a couple other positions we can build in through halfway through the year, we cut their salaries in half, and then by the time we get to that halfway through the year, we know more about the reconciliation.
I also say that part of this request is that we have that clarity. It's not to, it's so that we can do the blocking and tackling, so that.
exactly, so we aren't just like playing catch-up for,
A public-
like you
yeah.
can't ever get anything done because you're still working on catch-up.
Yeah, because and I can see that in the organization, they're doing day-to-day tasks instead of the really big things that would get you the big federal spending. Because cities that run really well already have their monster federal spending, congressionally directed spending packages in there. And cities that are, just trying to hold it together throughout the days because they've been underinvested in, there's not enough staff there, and they're not investing in roads as much as they should be. And you can see that over the last 4 or 5 years. It's pretty, you don't need an engineering degree
you
to
just
see the
need
underinvestment in
a
roads around
car.
here. So so again, that other piece of whether it's in Public Works, in some of the clerk's office area, and I think there is some additional, especially with vacancy and turnover, that we're going to need a little more than that. But I can come back and do a little bit more on this for next week and decide.
The sad thing, it does look like we're picking on the staff because they happen to be the last one to add into the budget. And I hate that, but I don't know if there's,
There's nothing that says that there couldn't be other revenues that could contribute it, and I've said this before, and in some ways, it's selling your soul to balance a budget, but, it's gotta be surplus properties to see.
It's interesting, I talked to, and this is kind of goes into honestly, I didn't ask for it this year, I might next year. Jane and I are gonna work on a plan, but I kind of think that, housing and economic development, that housing piece is so key. We do own some surplus properties, there's some other places, but is it better to sell them for cash, or is it better to get houses built on there so we can get taxes forever?
Yeah.
And like the WS development property, if we can get one of those big box stores, that's 300 grand in taxes in the pocket forever, every single year. But I can't ever get to that level to be attacking that stuff unless I'm not, up till 10:30 at night.
Being the tree warden,
Yeah. Doing agile scrum project management from organization to organization to organization to organization. That is all I will do over the next year. And this is, it's again, it's not even, I think, what it could be. There's chief of staff, there's a person who's solely working on housing. There's a lot of the other big stuff that I've been analyzing Bangor's organization. Now they're bigger than us as a city, and but in terms of like our service center to 60,000 people, and and we've analyzed other cities that I thought were comps, but they really just don't have the complexity. We've interviewed a lot of finance directors from other cities and towns that just really are not nearly as complex as Ellsworth is. Federal grants management, state, local. Tourism, and if we can start getting into more, those kind of, that's where I'd like to switch gears towards, if the team has the time and we really have the resources to do it. But I've got to, let me build it back in the budget, let's maybe talk some more. I know this piece is the last one. I think we're down from 18.2, and to what? To
I got you.
Much.
17.84.
17.84.
That's with everything. 17.84 is with adding the 675,000.
But we may not be doing that because that might be an inflated number.
That
Yeah, I
number
think-
is higher than it's gonna be. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And if you look at the mill, and again, property value increase of the mill for a long time has been at 18. And you look at our mill rate in comparison to others, the 18 for a service center in town is actually on the lower end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Mill rates wise. And again, that's why I think those kind of 2021, 2022, that mill rate drop, it really sort of artificially or lowered where we are typically at for the services we're providing.
The problem is the mill rate dropped dramatically, but the bills didn't, people's didn't.
No, that-
The tax bill didn't, the mill rate might have reduced, but the tax bills didn't.
Well, I would say for adding
that's
140,000 and 42,000 each year, when in 2009 you were adding, 6 times that much, it's pretty clear that they were under even the commitment. That was the
Yeah.
actual tax bill. That's why that
Something wrong with
when you
that.
went back up to 17 blank, you went up from 15. It was an enormous tax increase, but there was 2 or 3 years where there were very small tax increases. Comparative to earlier years, like the previous 10 years, tracking towards close to a consistent 18 mill rate, with a consistent I did the math, it was about $700,000 a year out of the budget. But then 2021, 2022, 2023, you had 42,000 to the budget commitment, 142,000, 142,000. You can do the math on how much wasn't committed for those 3 years. But, worse than that, actually, a lot of that money was kind of spent. That's where we're gonna get probably in the accounting on how the reserves got drawn down. Some of this we can bond for, I think that, and that's the roads piece too, that's a big underinvestment, that we kind of need to take into account, as well. And as I talked to Tim, you kind of get to the end of the line, it's, our school's been voted on, that's out. Public safety, collective bargaining agreements, those agree, the benefit increases, that's out. All right, what about general government? Can we cut 2 staffers from it, from the requests? Okay, we'll do that, and we'll do roads. And that's how and if you do that over a 10-year period of time, that's, I think that's kind of what we're feeling now.
Which leans towards one thing that we talked about a couple of times here, that last year, I brought in 10 years worth of tax bills, and in 10 years, it had gone up $500, $50 a year, and I said at the time that maybe that was the wrong amount, maybe it should have been 75 or 100. And then bang, one year it went to 608, and if it would have been a little balanced and it had gone $100 a year, I think that that's what we're talking about here.
Exactly.
That, you know, maybe the $50 a year wasn't the right number, and if it would have been 100, probably everyone, in consistent increases, probably everyone could have accepted the situation much easier. And I'm picking on my number because I went and got 10 years' tax bills, but it's relevant, and we've talked about it this time, that, you know, maybe we didn't know when we had it so good.
It's interesting, like, it's kind of like Larry's comment, right, which is like, they said it was this giant increase. I said, that can't be true, and they can't be, it's actually, you should have been questioning it
Not having.
when it was
When it
$42,000
wasn't.
increase.
But instead, you're like, look what a good job we did.
And those 3 years were the highest inflationary years in a generation. So how did Ellsworth beat inflation for 3 years?
And
That
that's what we,
scares me.
and we can keep talking about that and being sad about it, but then we just have to like suck it up and get the work done that hasn't been done for all that time.
Yeah, and staggering, and maybe I need to, let me look at, you know, staggering for what, we are at a much lower increase than it was last year. But how we kind of stick towards staggering towards, and also, but, you know, and how we, to your point, Steve, on how do we drive this down, it's gonna be through growth, whether it's, and the best kind of growth is those WS developments, for those box stores, that's increases, tax rates. This, interesting talking to the, our police chief on if it's, if it's apartment complexes, that's a different kind of growth that's gonna require more police. As opposed to
Police
box stores,
education.
that's like, that's the money that comes in and is new, and we should probably be trying to grab more. You know,
That's what
and
Scott and I were talking about.
police and fire are expensive, but I think they're also under, I mean, Ellsworth is growing, and, you know, the police and fire departments,
The city's far outpaced our capabilities, both fire and police.
and I want to drill into some data too, and how we do baseline metrics across the organization for how much customer service, the increases are kind of coming in on us, and that's why with code and assessing, I was there the other day, and some developers walked into the code office, and both of our code enforcement officers were out doing inspections, and the developer was like, anybody around here? And I was like, sorry, like, you know, they're on inspection, can you come back later? And it's like, oh, this would have been nice to have our code assistant so that they can be planning for a bunch of things and servicing the day-to-day needs of the code department and business friendliness. Hence why it's in my, my piece there, so.
So as and Scott and I were talking about this before the meeting, that as these big developments are coming in, there are no impact fees or development fees that help with the capital improvements of the city and help so we can add more firefighters and police, help the education system, roads and things like that. And maybe that's something to look at.
Yeah, I've got a huge, like, I'm excited too, like, policy laundry list. You know, I've talked about it, the short-term rental regulations. You know, I know that's under consideration. It takes an incredible amount of economic theory to do impact analysis of what that would be, and we need to do it because the market is, we see it, the second most profitable short-term rental market in the country. That's a plus and a negative. And if we were to regulate, that could have 20-year consequences in the future of this community, both positive and negative. But to have a staff that can, like, you know, be on that and not like Matt and I were today, which was on some very like detailed roads planning on like how do we help kind of organize that piece. So those are the ones that are the big picture policy strategy that need to be done perfectly, that we probably should be getting to faster, that I'd like to start addressing. And yeah, the policy, procurement policies and ordinance reviews, and, you know, I'm looking for the job here, that, you know, the personnel ordinance hasn't been updated in a long time. The planning ordinances, what changes should we, you know, be considered to ensure we're continuing to be modern, but also business friendly. Really having a staff that has the time to do that is important. But I'll circle the wagons, I'll make some of the changes here. It seems like we're getting closer. We have one last issue here to kind of iron out. I'll try and do a better job of the narrative of this. I apologize. Like I said, I wish I had 3 months to really do the analysis of the organization, that I could just have, here's the budget, here's the backfill, here's the increase, here's your general rate of turnover, we're gonna drop that by 40%, and I'll be able to do the true budgeting to give you like the dollar increase for the tax commit for the year. It's just difficult, and not being able to kind of use supplemental budget cycles like they do in state government. It makes it even more difficult because you're fully committed in some ways on this type of thing at the beginning of the year, so.
Well, to speak to that, though, I mean, you're 3 months in, and you've had to be digging the ditch and filling the ditch and doing all of that, so.
It's a big team.
Yeah, no, I get it, but you've had to, you haven't had time to manage, you haven't been able to manage.
Yeah, it's impressive. I think we all
It
have
is.
a lot of confidence, especially that the staff finally seems, everybody has a really good understanding of what's going on, how it's all working.
It's been great. The community's been great. I think the transparency and the budget, we've gotten some great input from the community too, and we're gonna work like crazy to get this online so everybody can get the most updated version with all the changes, and so the next time around we'll have this one piece to go over. It looks like everything else is pretty close to locked in, so thank you all. 16 meetings around the table.
So next Wednesday is our.
Fine, like we vote on it then. We have to, or do a continuing
I
resolution.
checked the newspapers today, both 2 weeks ago and this last week's, had it advertised and in there. So it's an official, special meeting, votes will be going forward, we're in good shape.
So next year, if we have 16, though, we'll be planning all 16 and not having 5 where we're actually budgeting.
I bet there won't be
I
16.
don't think
No,
they'll be
I'm
16.
guessing.
No, but you know what I mean? Because we've had all of these, but we've only actually been able to work the last
Right.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
And we're,
Well,
scrambling with unknown numbers and,
In some ways, we're gonna start where we're at now, which is we're at 17 blank. And you're gonna have the school side of things, the 55% of the budget to analyze and review, and
Yeah,
the
not
full
much we
sweep
can
of
do about
things,
that.
department to department, and no more, it's budgeted versus actuals, and why isn't it? We're gonna be tracking, now that Nate built this in the Cassell software, month to month, hey, okay, that line item's getting a little bigger, what's going on with that? And, yes, I think that'll be a helpful.
Yeah, actuals and
and it's got to be frustrating for absolutely everybody. I get it.
Well, it'll be so interesting to watch this year. It'll be so interesting to watch next year.
Yeah.
Are you rubbing
I'm
that
gonna
in?
come- I'm gonna-
Are you rubbing that
I'm
in?
gonna be watching you guys so
Popcorn.
much.
Just remember, there's
You
a
go
lot
through
of
all of these
cities
years and all
that
this
like
time,
to
and now
have
you're going
households
to,
problems.
just when the good
Yeah.
stuff's happening, you're
That's
going
for
to jump out?
I do sort of feel like, I just found that
Write in Hanson on the ballot.
That's right.
Seriously, you've been through so much, why not now go into the good times?
Awesome. Well, we'll see you on Wednesday. We've got some work to do as a team, and thank you as always. This has been really, really helpful.
Thank you. This was great. This was fun.